Being a trucker wasn't a dream job, but it paid the bills and kept me moving. I liked the quiet of the highway, the hum of the engine, and the sense of freedom. My rig, a weathered Kenworth with a chrome grille, was my home on wheels. I'd named her Betty after my mom. She'd taken me on plenty of long rides in her old Chevy when I was a kid, back when the world felt wide and full of possibility. This particular haul was nothing special pallets of electronics from St. Louis to Denver. A long stretch, but manageable. The dispatcher warned me about an incoming storm rolling over the Rockies, but I wasn't worried. I'd driven through worse. The sun dipped below the horizon as I hit a desolate stretch of I-70. The road was dark except for my headlights slicing through the night. The radio crackled, switching between static and faint country tunes. That's when I saw a figure standing on the shoulder. At first, I thought it was a stranded driver. They wore a long coat, their head covered by a wide-brimmed hat. I slowed, my instincts telling me to help. But as Betty rolled closer, my stomach knotted. Something was off. The figure didn't move, didn't even glance at my truck. Just stood there, facing the road like they were waiting for something or someone. I hit the gas and sped past, watching them fade into my side mirror. 15 minutes later, I saw them again. Same spot, same stance. My foot hit the brake without thinking. How the hell did they get here? I hadn't passed any turnoffs or side roads. It was impossible. The figure lifted their head. For a moment, I swore I saw their eyes to pinpricks of glowing red light staring straight at me. My radio sputtered, then cut to silence. The storm hit hard around midnight. Sheets of rain lashed against the windshield, and Betty's wipers struggled to keep up. Visibility dropped to nearly nothing. Every mile felt like a gamble, the road disappearing under water and darkness. I hadn't seen another car in hours. Just me, Betty, and the storm. And then there was him. A man appeared in the rain, standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching as the rig skidded to a halt. My heart was pounding. The man stood motionless, water streaming off his clothes. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his 20s, with shaggy hair plastered to his face. I rolled down the window just enough to shout, "You all right, buddy? Can I get a ride?" He said. His voice was low, almost drowned out by the rain. Every instinct told me no, but leaving him out there felt wrong, even if something about him set my nerves on edge. "Fine," I muttered. "Hop in." He climbed into the passenger seat, dripping water all over the floor. His clothes were soaked, but he didn't shiver or look cold. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Wherever you're going," he said, staring straight ahead. I clenched the wheel, unease creeping up my spine. Most hitchhikers had a destination. This guy didn't. As we drove, the hitchhiker didn't say much. He didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk. Just sat there, staring at the road with those unblinking eyes. The storm grew worse. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the mountains in eerie flashes. Each time, I glanced at the hitchhiker, half expecting him to disappear. But he was always there, solid and silent. "Got a name?" I asked, trying to break the tension. He turned to me slowly, his lips curling into a faint smile. "Call me Red," the radio sputtered back to life. But the sound that came through wasn't music or static. It was whispers, low, overlapping voices speaking words I couldn't understand. Red leaned forward, turning the dial as if searching for a station. The whispers grew louder, filling the cab. "Turn that off," I snapped, yanking the knob. The radio went dead, but the whispers lingered, faint and unsettling. I glanced at Red, but he didn't seem to notice. He just smiled, a toothy grin that didn't reach his eyes. By a.m., I was desperate to reach a truck stop. My eyelids were heavy, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. But the highway didn't make sense anymore. Mile markers blurred past in the rain, and exits I swore I'd passed hours ago reappeared. The GPS on my dash froze, the screen stuck on a blank map. "You're lost," Red said, his voice cutting through the rain. "No, I'm not," I snapped, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. Red chuckled. "This road doesn't end, you know. Not for people like you." I turned to him, my chest tightening. "What the hell are you talking about?" He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned closer, his grin stretching unnaturally wide. His skin seemed to ripple, shifting in the dim light. The truck shuddered as something slammed into it, a deafening bang that echoed through the cab. I swerved, fighting to keep control as the rig skidded across the slick asphalt. Red was laughing now, his voice warped and echoing, like it came from somewhere deep beneath the earth. When I came to, Betty was still running, her engine humming like nothing had happened. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and silent. Red was gone, but the whispers were still there. I looked around, panic rising as I realized the road was no longer familiar. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, surrounded by a flat, featureless plain. No signs, no landmarks, no other vehicles. And then I saw them figures standing along the shoulder. Dozens of them, all wearing wide-brimmed hats and long coats. Their eyes glowed red, just like the figure I'd seen earlier. The whispers grew louder, drowning out the sound of the engine. I slammed the accelerator, desperate to escape, but the figures didn't move. They just watched as I barreled past, their heads turning in unison to follow my truck. The GPS blinked back to life, displaying a single word: welcome. That was 3 days ago. I haven't stopped driving. I don't think I can. The highway just keeps going, twisting in impossible ways. Every time I try to pull over, the engine dies until I get back on the road. The figures are always there watching. And sometimes when the radio crackles, I hear Red's voice. "This road doesn't end, you know. Not for people like you. Now I understand. I'm part of it. Just another trucker lost on the highway that never ends." There's a certain loneliness that comes with long-haul trucking. The nights are long, the roads are endless, and the only company you have is the static-laden hum of late-night radio. I'd been a trucker for 15 years, and I thought I'd seen it all until the night Route 91 taught me how wrong I was. I was hauling a load of lumber from Billings, Montana, to Salt Lake City, Utah. It was late November, and the air had that biting chill that creeps into your bones. The dispatcher warned me about Route 91, said it was remote, poorly maintained, and had a reputation for being weird, but I liked quiet roads. Less traffic meant fewer problems. The first few hours were uneventful. My rig, a reliable Freightliner Cascadia, rumbled along steadily as I sipped lukewarm coffee and listened to a true crime podcast. The GPS showed nothing but a straight stretch of road ahead, cutting through dense, shadowy forest. Then, the headlights caught something a deer, I thought at first. But it wasn't moving. It stood just off the shoulder, a pale, gaunt figure with hollow eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. It wasn't a deer. It was a woman, barefoot, and dressed in a tattered nightgown. I slowed the truck, the hairs on my arms standing on end. "Hey," I called out through the open window. "You okay?" She didn't answer, didn't move, just stared at me, Her head tilted ever so slightly. Her lips parted, and I swear I heard her whisper something, though the engine drowned out the words. I hit the gas and drove away, my pulse hammering. About 10 miles down the road, I caught sight of headlights in my mirrors, a pickup truck closing in fast. It pulled up alongside me, a beat-up Ford with a dented front bumper. The driver, a man in a trucker cap, waved at me frantically, signaling for me to pull over. Reluctantly, I eased Betty onto the shoulder. The man climbed out of his truck and jogged to my window, his face pale and slick with sweat. "You see her?" he asked, his voice tight with fear. "Who?" "The woman," he said, glancing nervously down the road. "She's not real, man." "She's a deafening bang," cut him off. It sounded like a gunshot, but it came from inside my trailer. I jumped out, flashlight in hand, and rushed to the back. The stranger followed, muttering prayers under his breath. When I opened the trailer doors, I froze. The lumber was scattered, and deep claw marks raked across the wooden planks. But there was no one inside. The man cursed under his breath. "She's marked you now." "Who?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "The lady of Route 91, he said. "You picked the wrong road, friend." "She doesn't let go." The stranger insisted on following me, and I was too shaken to argue. He said he'd seen the lady before, that she preyed on travelers who stayed too long on her stretch of road. "She's not just a ghost," he said. "She's worse." The storm rolled in around midnight. Rain lashed against the windshield, and the road turned slick and treacherous. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly they ached. The headlights of the stranger's truck stayed close behind, a small comfort in the oppressive darkness. Then the CB radio crackled to life. "Help me." The voice was faint, distorted, but unmistakably female. I grabbed the receiver. "Who is this?" "Please," the voice sobbed. "Don't leave me here." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Where are you?" The voice dissolved into static, then came back clearer. "Behind you." I glanced in the side mirror, expecting to see the stranger's headlights. Instead, there was nothing but blackness. Panic set in. I floored the accelerator, the engine roaring as Betty surged forward. The radio crackled again, and this time, the voice wasn't pleading. It was laughing low, guttural, and inhuman. I drove for what felt like hours, but the road didn't change. The same mile markers, the same trees, the same desolation. The stranger's truck was gone, but I couldn't remember when I'd lost him. The rain stopped suddenly, leaving the air deathly still. I glanced at the clock on the dash. It was stuck on 3:13 a.m. That's when I saw her again. The lady stood in the middle of the road, her arms outstretched. I slammed the brakes, the rig skidding to a stop mere feet from her. This time she moved. She climbed onto the hood, her skeletal fingers pressing against the windshield. Her eyes, those hollow, reflective pits, bored into mine. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered, her voice echoing in my head. The windshield spiderwebbed as her fingers dragged across the glass, and the cab filled with the stench of decay. I screamed and hit the gas, the rig lurching forward. She vanished the moment the truck moved, but the laughter lingered, bouncing around inside the cab. I don't know how I made it out. The next thing I remember is the truck shuddering to a halt at a gas station just outside Salt Lake City. The attendant looked at me like I was a ghost. "You all right, buddy?" I stumbled out of the cab, shaking and drenched in sweat. The stranger's truck was parked nearby, but he was nowhere to be found. Inside the trailer, the claw marks were gone. The lumber was neatly stacked, as if nothing had happened. But the whispers followed me. Every time I close my eyes, I hear them. Every time I drive at night, I see her face in the rearview mirror. I've tried quitting trucking, but it doesn't matter. The lady of Route 91 doesn't let go, and now neither does the road. They called it the midnight freight job, an enlisted haul that only went to the most desperate truckers. I was one of them. My rig payments were overdue, and my fuel card was maxed out. So when the dispatcher at a no-name freight company in Amarillo offered me $5,000 for a single overnight run, no questions asked, I didn't hesitate. The load was sealed in a rusted, dented trailer hitched to my Peterbilt. The manifest just said, "Delivery required, strict deadline," with no specifics. Whatever, I thought, as long as the check cleared. They gave me a route that avoided way stations and major highways, a lonely path cutting through the New Mexico desert. I didn't care. I just wanted to get it done. The dispatcher's final warning as I pulled out stuck with me though. Whatever happens, don't stop. No matter what, the desert night was eerily quiet, my headlights illuminating the endless stretch of cracked asphalt. The moon was a sliver in the sky, casting just enough light to show the jagged outlines of distant mesas. The trailer was heavy, unnaturally so. Even with my rig's horsepower, every hill felt like I was dragging a mountain. The wheels groaned against the weight, and the engine seemed to strain louder than usual. After 2 hours of driving, I noticed something strange. My mirrors didn't reflect the road behind me. No taillights, no horizon, just darkness, as if the trailer swallowed everything in its wake. The air in the cab grew colder. I adjusted the heater, but it didn't help. My breath fogged the windshield as I leaned forward, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. Then came the first thud. It was faint, like something shifting in the trailer. I glanced at my mirrors again, but the darkness remained. A second thud followed, harder this time, rattling the rig. Probably just the load settling, I muttered to myself, though I wasn't convinced. I passed a faded mile marker. The numbers didn't match the map. No service stations, no landmarks, just an endless ribbon of road cutting through the void. Then I saw them. Figures stood along the shoulder, barely visible in the dim glow of my headlights. They were spaced evenly, every 100 feet or so, staring at the truck as I passed. They weren't hitchhikers. They weren't even moving. Just silhouettes with impossibly long limbs and heads tilted at unnatural angles. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. "Don't stop," I whispered, repeating the dispatcher's warning like a mantra. The thudding in the trailer grew louder. The figures on the roadside began to turn their heads in unison, following the truck. Their glowing eyes pierced the darkness, locking onto me. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were waiting for me to stop. The thudding inside the trailer became rhythmic, like footsteps pacing back and forth. Then came the scratching, long, deliberate scrapes that vibrated through the cab. I grabbed the CB radio, hoping for a voice to break the silence. "Breaker 1-9, anyone out there?" Static answered me. And then a voice. "They're watching you," it said, distorted and low. "Who is this?" I barked. "They want what's in the trailer. Don't stop." Not for anything. The line went dead. I hit the gas, pushing the rig harder than I ever had. The figures on the roadside began to move, stepping closer to the edge of the asphalt. Their eyes glowed brighter, their limbs twisting unnaturally as they reached out. The trailer groaned, and the scratching turned to pounding. Something inside was trying to get out. Panic overtook logic. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled off onto a dirt patch and killed the engine, the silence deafening. The pounding stopped immediately. I grabbed a tire iron from behind the seat and approached the trailer, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The figures on the roadside were gone, but the air felt heavier, as if the night itself was pressing down on me. The seal on the trailer was intact, but the metal looked warped, as if something had been pushing against it from the inside. I pried the lock off and swung the doors open. At first, all I saw was darkness. Then the flashlight beam caught something, a single wooden crate, no bigger than a coffin, bolted to the floor. It was shaking. A low, guttural growl came from inside. Before I could react, the crate exploded open, splinters flying. Something massive and unnatural surged out, a writhing mass of black tendrils and glowing red eyes. I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The thing oozed out of the trailer, its tendrils stretching impossibly far, wrapping around the rig like hungry vines. I ran. I don't remember how I got away. The next thing I knew, I was at a gas station on the edge of town, trembling and covered in sweat. The truck was gone. I tried calling the dispatcher, but the number was disconnected. A week later, I got a check in the mail, 5000, no return address. Since that night, I've heard rumors. Other truckers talk about the midnight freight job, about a sealed load that's more than it seems. Some say the route changes, but the rules are always the same. Don't stop. Don't open the trailer. Don't look back. I don't drive anymore, but every now and then, late at night, I hear a faint thudding sound, like something heavy shifting in the back of a trailer. And I wonder if it's found someone else.